Hi, folks. Today we're focusing on Middle Eastern and North African Americans. And as we begin, we will start with social history and demographics or demography. The term Middle East is where we really need to start. It's ultimately a European view of the West Asia region. It really reflects the long colonization of this region by Europeans. In addition to West Asia, North Africa, and even Europe have been used to describe what ultimately fits into the region. Excuse me. Middle Eastern and Middle East really describe a region with a great variety and range of diversity in terms of race, culture, religion, language, nation states, and stateless nations. So it's a real mix of a lot of different kinds of cultural, physical, and social geography. And we're looking also within that at the major ethnic and cultural groups that tend to be more prominent in terms of their concentration and population in the country, in the United States, so to speak. Starting with Persian or Iranian Americans. So, this cultural group has origins in Iran, mostly arriving after the 1979 Iranian Revolution. This group is largely concentrated in greater Los Angeles, California. Also, within that, in terms of major ethnic and cultural groups, we're looking at Arab Americans as well. This cultural group has origins in any of the 22 Arab nations of the Middle East, who are predominantly Syrian, Lebanese, and Jordanian Christians. Arab Americans are concentrated throughout Metro Detroit, Los Angeles, Greater New York, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Muslim Americans are also a part of this group. This is a diverse group of U.S. citizens comprised largely of African American, Arab, and South Asian folks and ancestries. And Jewish Americans also are a part of this group too, having origins in Southern and Eastern Europe, largely concentrated in Greater New York, Los Angeles, and South Florida. Excuse me. That Arab Israeli conflicts in the 1970s, that these contributed significantly to the cultural and political anti Arab sentiment in the United States from those points into the present. Also, anti Semitism, with this terminology, we're referring to the irrational fear and hatred of Jews. Both anti Semitism and Islamophobia have increased significantly since the COVID-19 pandemic and the Israel Hamas war in Gaza. Also, within that, we have to examine and discuss the Israeli Palestinian conflict. Largely consistent with conflict between Muslims and Jews, both religions have deep roots in the Middle East, encompassing major religious events, geographies, and spaces, and see these areas as sacred and promised to members of the respective groups. In terms of gender and sexual orientation with respect to Middle Eastern and North African Americans, LGBTQ rights and expression are severely restricted in the Middle East and throughout the Middle East and experience varying levels of generally greater acceptance, in contrast, if you will, to what see in the Middle East. We see greater acceptance contrasting with that in the United States. Going forward, Middle Eastern Americans are politically more aligned with the Democratic Party traditionally, yet are socially conservative with respect to gender and sexual orientation. Gender expression and feminism among Middle Eastern American communities also must take the context of religious social norms for women into account. And so, again, we're looking at a wide range of cultural and social geographic groups. And so, there isn't necessarily one singular kind of approach to gender and sexual orientation, that there's going to be nuance, there's going to be significant variety with respect to experiences, particularly for women in terms of the roles and rights and attitudes towards women in general. In terms of civil rights and resistance, Arab American and Muslim activism, for instance, with respect to that, key social institutions that advocate for civil rights include the Council on American and Islamic Relations and the Muslim Public Affairs Commission. With respect to Jewish activism centers on the Anti Defamation League, and Jewish Americans also were allies in the struggle for racial justice for African Americans, a legacy that exists in the present in the form of the Congressional Black Jewish Caucus in the United States Congress.